thank you to everybody who's here, all the panelists, and do you guys want to go through just a quick intro of yourself, and then we'll kind of get rolling right into the questions then. Josh, why don't we start out with you, since you're top left in my screen.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Josh Walz. I am a senior designer over at ZoCo Design, and we work at ZoCo doing a lot of brand strategy, UX, UI, and web design. So I kind of get my hands dirty with all those different things on a daily basis.
All right, Kristen.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kristen Harris, and I'm one of the founders of Portfolio Creatives. So we help people. We're a staffing and recruiting firm for creatives, and been in business for 15 years. And before that, I worked at Limited Brands in design and art direction. So I'm a CCAD grad, artist at heart.
Awesome. Brian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kaiser. I'm a freelance photographer, and prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the photo editor at 614 Magazine. I also shoot fairly often for the New York Times and Bon Appetit, as well as a few commercial clients.
Right on. And last but not least, Tayler.
Hello, everybody. I am Tayler, and I am with TekSystems. We are a services company. So I support our creative services, so a lot of UX, UI, any type of designers, researchers, even like front-end development. But we work locally with a lot of different clients here in Columbus, and I am excited to be here.
Well, thanks for being here, guys. A quick, just kind of like technical note for everybody that's joining us. There is a Q&A like box that you should be able to just kind of drop your questions into, and then we should hopefully be able to go through and answer them. We're going to save the last 15 minutes for any kinds of questions. We do have a number of different prompts that we can go off of that will hopefully cover most things. But if you're going through this and you think that there's maybe a few holes in the conversation, you still have questions, then either drop them in the Q&A or throw them in the chat box if the Q&A is not working. We tried to test it out initially, and turns out the speakers can't really do a Q&A with themselves. But that being said, we are talking about resume and portfolio building best practices. Back when I was in design school, in our sort of ever-changing world, we now have LinkedIn that has much more, precedence than it did previously. I think there was, back when I graduated, which is in 2014, there was sort of a weird stigma around it that, people didn't like LinkedIn, or they just thought it was like cheesy, hammy, stuff like that. But nowadays, having become a business owner, I have grown to really understand the gravity that a platform like LinkedIn can maintain, for yourself, as far as just getting to know other people in your industry, putting yourself out there, looking for jobs, whatever it may be. And so that's what we'd like to sort of start out this conversation with, is LinkedIn as a platform, and overall sort of personal brand management. So to start everything off, what are the different steps to building a robust profile on LinkedIn? Professional profile too. Another keyword here. Yeah. And anybody can jump in here with what they got.
I mean, I can jump in with what we look for, which is, maybe kind of helpful. So, we're always looking for work history. So, it doesn't have to replicate your resume, but at least it should have that work history in there, so you can see. And a lot of times you can tag back to the company and LinkedIn and all of that. And another thing I always really appreciate is a good headline. So I know, like, down in your jobs, you have your real job title, but a lot of times in the headline, like sort of saying what you do, maybe you say like, I'm an art director at a healthcare company that focuses on interactive work or whatever, like something a little more explanatory up in that headline. You know, when someone's looking for you, sometimes that's where people are searching or where they're looking. I mean, really it's about making yourself searchable, if you think about it, at least from a recruiting, job hunting tool. It's a giant searchable database. So you need to be using the same words that you think people would search for or filter by, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think, just to kind of piggyback off of that, LinkedIn isn't, at least in my experience, LinkedIn isn't the place where you're going to just put yourself online and suddenly people are going to start flocking to you, wanting you to work for them. It's not like the magical tell-all thing that it seemed like it was, at least when I was in school, that like people would be like, oh, you got to get on LinkedIn. I think what LinkedIn is more so is about connecting with people that you already know or have a personal connection with. It's about kind of maintaining that network. So for example, like if I've had any past clients that I've worked with, we'll connect with each other on LinkedIn. And even though the project that we've worked on has ended years ago, we're still able to see what each other are up to. I'm able to see when they get a new job or when they get promoted. They're able to see the same thing with me. We're able to still keep in contact with one another. And it's really about, being there for each other in those moments of progression with each other, so that if the moment finds itself right, where you are in the right place at the right time, or they're in the right place at the right time, and it's like, oh man, I'm looking for a web designer. I really need one. Oh my gosh, who is that guy that I met or that I worked with or that I volunteered with a few years ago? Oh my gosh, here they are. It's a really quick snap way to get to other people that you have met before. I've never found any success with just logging on and just like following a bunch of people. It never really seems to go anywhere. So I think to build your portfolio, you want it to just reflect who you are. You want to kind of like what Kristen was saying, you want to be able to make sure that you're using terminology and things that people would be searching for and looking for, because you want to make sure that you're representing yourself as best as possible. You might meet a connection or meet someone at like a networking event, and they might not know that, maybe they think you're a web designer, but they may not know you also do branding work. And it's like, man, I loved what they had to say about web design, but I need brand done. They do brand too. That's awesome. So you just kind of want to get it built up and make sure that it's an accurate representation of who you are as a person. And at least in my personal opinion, make it sound like it's you and coming from yourself. Write it like it's personable, and not like I'm like a robot trying to find a job, like make it sound more personable and it tends to work better.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I or me or whatever, not like a third party wrote this about you.
That's, I think, one of the biggest conundrums when it comes to, LinkedIn versus, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The platforms are very much so you, and LinkedIn, the stigma being, all right, well, we're on here to get a job. How do you maintain a professional voice on there, but simultaneously sort of infuse yourself, your personality, but also not say, insanely outlandish things that people will instantly just
judge you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that a big part of that is just reminding yourself what is that platform for? It's a professional platform. So I would just encourage anyone to use your voice on that platform the same way you would in maybe a meeting with your coworkers, or for those of you who are students who maybe have limited experience with coworkers, think of it as maybe a conversation that you're having with with your aunts and uncles, right? Like, you're going to be yourself. You're going to be, you're going to have fun. You're going to be somewhat casual, but you're also not going to be quite as casual as you would with, your friends, or as you would out at a bar. Just think, you don't have to be so stiff and rigid that you think of LinkedIn as this place where you can only speak as if you're speaking, like as if the voice of it is like your resume. It doesn't have to be written in such a way that it's exclusively feels like that. I would, as Kristen mentioned, I would, in the sections where you kind of describe your job history, the things that you do, that you do want to feel and look like a resume, because that's how people are going to, use it. Excuse me. But when it comes to the posts, the things that you share on LinkedIn, which I would highly encourage you to do, because that's how you get in front of people. That's where you can have a more professional voice, but one that's still, as Josh mentioned, one that's still you.
Yeah, and that's really the same with your profile picture too. Like, it should be you. Like, it's not the place to be a picture of your cat or something. It should be you. I mean, it might be like, you, here I am in my home office now, or whatever. Like, it can have some personality, but if I'm meeting somebody, I'll look them up so I know what they look like when I'm trying to find them in the coffee shop. So I want to know what they look like, I mean, it is a place for people to actually see you, not, a landscape or whatever. And there are other places to show your own work, but not in your little profile square.
So for, especially for the students, whether or not you just graduated or still in school, one of the things that I remember being sort of especially difficult back when I was still in school is really like, LinkedIn is based around your network. And if you're still in school, it's easy to say, all right, well, I've been really focusing on the coursework. I have my friends from college, all that stuff, friends from home, family, whoever. But past that, you may not actually have all that much of a professional network really built up yet. So how do you really go about searching for and ideally meaningfully connecting, as hard as that may actually be?
I can jump in on this one. Just like what I've always gone off of is definitely like friends, family, your warmest connections first, classmates, professors are really good. But also utilizing like alumni. There's so many people that you went to school with that are so willing to help. I went to OU, and I know if I connect with anybody from there, and I would message them if they're working at like a Microsoft and that's somewhere I'm interested in working, or a Nationwide, reaching out to them. And even if somebody reached out to me and was interested in working at TekSystems, I would be more than happy to help. So definitely think utilizing alumni is great, as well as whenever you're going to different networking events or career fairs or any type of meetup. And I use this analogy, if we all use probably Snapchat or Twitter, Instagram, and it's like, oh, we just met, like, what's your Snapchat code? Or, oh, like, what's your Instagram name so we can follow each other? If we did that the same way we could do that with like LinkedIn, you'd be able to grow it tremendously. Or if you're attending different webinars, I've been attending a lot of the Adobe ones, and after just connecting with the speakers from there, saying, hey, I really enjoyed the presentation, like would love to connect, and then have a conversation around it. So I think it's just being able to put yourself out there and going to different types of like meetups, events, especially during today's time, it's probably going to be a lot more virtual, but I would say anybody and everybody you can definitely connect with, whether it's different people in groups that you're a part of, but utilize the alumni. We're always willing to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The alumni thing is so wonderful. I completely agree with that. When I was in college, there was a couple of people that worked at this agency that I really admired called Huge, that they're out in like New York, and they're all over the place. But I knew he was an alumni, and I just reached out to him, and we got a couple of video chats set up where I just asked him some questions, and like a virtual coffee meeting, more or less. I think the thing though that is really punchy and impactful when it comes to LinkedIn is, and you were kind of hinting at that, Tayler, is utilizing those connections and then reaching out and talking with them. And I think reaching out and talking with them doesn't have to be a cold call, more or less, like on LinkedIn. I feel like it's pretty easy when you're on LinkedIn just to like quickly direct message them on LinkedIn. Maybe this is just a personal thing. I feel though that an email or something a little bit more personal goes a pretty long way. On LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn, with some professionals, it tends to have the outward appearance that if someone's reaching out to you on LinkedIn, it's because they want something from you. Like they want to hire you. They want to
Just a marketing spam email or something like that.
Yeah, like I get a lot of those on LinkedIn. So I think after a while, you start to get a little desensitized to that as a professional. But I think if someone just emails you directly and goes, hey, I found you on LinkedIn, I looked at your portfolio, or I blah, 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 I admire this or that, do a little bit of creeping. Like it sounds kind of weird, but like, use the tool, use LinkedIn and find their website, find their email, find some way to connect with them in a more personal way. And that's, at least to me, I think that's kind of like the golden area of LinkedIn, like where you have that profile with all that information in it. And instead of just like clicking that quick chat button on LinkedIn, like find their email and reach out to them. Because I feel like the person on the receiving end of that is going to be a lot more impressed that you went through, you kind of did your research on them a little bit more than just quickly hitting a button.
To piggyback off of your note, was that Brian?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, if you get a quick note, go for it. I was just going to add, I have kind of an active, passive, active strategy on LinkedIn. And what I mean by that is I actively post. So and this is something I would really strongly encourage anyone who's making work. If you're making work right now, or as a freelancer, or if you have work that you're proud of that you've made in the past, actively share that work, especially if it is the kind of work that a brand or a client or a business would see and say, I can see how this would work for me. So actively share that work. When you're doing that, tag the people that you made that work with or that you made that work for. And the reason I say that is, well, one, because it's, nobody does, it's very rare that we do things completely on our own. It almost always takes multiple people. So, spread the love and give recognition. Also demonstrate that you're capable of working with a team of people. But thirdly, and in a kind of like, for what it's worth, when you do that, if you tag the people that helped you with that project, or that were working with that project, with you on that project, it's going to show up in their feed. So their followers are likely going to see it in a way that they wouldn't see it if they don't already follow you. And so that brings me to the second piece of my active, passive, active strategy. So actively share things. Me personally, I don't go out and just like start following a bunch of people on LinkedIn. If they don't know me, if they don't have any connection to me, it just seems weird. Like, who's this guy? What does he want? So I'm pretty passive when it comes to following people, unless, and that comes to the third part of my active, passive, active strategy, unless they like one of my posts. So if I share something and I tag Kyle as being somebody who worked with that, on that project with me, and one of Kyle's followers sees that and likes it, or maybe even leaves a comment on it, but they don't follow me, I'll go through and take a look at their profile. And if it seems like they would have an interest in the kind of work that I do, maybe they're a designer, maybe they're an editor, maybe they work at a magazine, then I'll give them a follow, or I'll request whatever the nomenclature is on LinkedIn. But if there is that level of interaction where they've demonstrated that, like, literally they like my work, but they don't follow me, I'll give them a chance to do that. And I think that to me, it's a little bit like a conversation. If you walked up to somebody in a room and you started having a conversation with them and you immediately just started blasting them with information about yourself, they'd probably be like, oh, what the heck is with this person? And they'd walk away. But if you said something interesting and they were like, oh, that's interesting, and then you could probably say, yeah, thanks. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where do you work? What do you do? It's this kind of back and forth, and there's a little bit of a dance to it. But if you're careful and you don't come across as being thirsty, I think it can go a long way.
And I'll just layer onto that a little bit, because I'm so with you guys, like, especially Josh, if, I'm pretty easy to find my email, right? So somebody can easily track me down, and I would probably think a lot of them because they took the effort. But I don't even mind the messaging within LinkedIn, but I think just, first of all, like when I can't remember the word either, are you linking with someone, wherever it is, when you connect, you ask to connect with somebody, like always include a message of like why you want to connect. I get these ones that are just like a connection request. I'm like, I don't know who you are, and I'm okay with connecting with strangers, but like, why do you want to connect with me? Like, there's probably something you're looking for. And it is a business platform, right? So people are looking for something, and that's okay, but I'd like to know what it is. And then and Taylor, you said this too, when like, just say what you're looking for. Like, hi, I'm a recent graduate and I'm looking for some advice, or I'm looking for a job, or I see you know this person, could you introduce me? Like, whatever the ask is, I can say yes or no, but just tell me what you want, like just be upfront about it, because that's what the platform is about. Like, it's okay, but I don't just want a bunch of vague, like, hey, can we connect so I can pick your brain? Because I'm like, no.
Or just the people
I
that
want to know what you want, what you're asking of me. Maybe I'm not even the right person,
Yeah, if their opening line is, hi, how are you? Red flag.
Yeah.
Just get
how about
some sort of a point to
you?
it. I don't want to talk. I want to know what you want out of me.
Right.
Please.
Maybe we can work together or whatever. Like, it could be a good opportunity for me too, but I need to know what you're looking for.
Yeah. So sort of, I see the two questions that were posted, and those fall under, at least in my mind, in the resume and portfolio building sense of things, in which case we're going to sort of dive right into that. If there are any further LinkedIn questions or anything that we didn't cover, feel free to pop a question out there and we can see if we can give you an answer in the last 15. But there is, there's both like the LinkedIn, resume, which is fairly standardized. Like, you just link to the company that you've worked with, and they oftentimes, or, usually have a page set up so it can just link to them, then takes to their, company page and contact them so they can research what the company is. But as far as like standalone resumes, like paper and pencil resume, or it typed up, whatever. There's always a lot of, I don't know if there's really any clear answers here. So that's where, like, even I don't have the best answers for this one, but like the resume formatting, you'd think this is the creative field. At least that's the undertone with what we're talking about here. So, we don't need to have like the same standardized, like, Times New Roman approach that, say, a lawyer, might need when they're pounding out their resumes. And so as far as like formatting is concerned, how do you feel they need to be formatted? Or is there really a standard approach to formatting?
I mean, it's an informational document, so it still has to be clear. I think it's great to have some personality, and if you're a designer, it should be well designed, or if you're a photographer, maybe it has to be for photography or whatever, but it still has to be an informational document, and people start at the top and hopefully they make their way all the way to the bottom. So like, it's the above the fold thing. Like, you have to capture them at the top with your statement and your first, skills list or whatever. I guess just, I always feel like, don't get caught up in the design at the expense of the information, right? It has to be informative, but then you can design it and make it beautiful too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to bounce. Oh,
go for
sorry,
it.
guys.
You're good.
I would say to bounce off of like what Kristen said. A lot of the times managers, and I would assume especially now because there's probably so many people applying to different jobs, a lot of the times they're doing like a Command F, and if you don't have the top 3 things that a manager is looking for, no matter how pretty or how well designed your resume looks, it's probably going to the no pile. So I think it's definitely very important to make sure it looks like clean and concise and you're getting across the information that you need to. But I do think you are in a creative industry you should show your personality, and if you want to make it a specific color, or if you want to format it a certain way or add a design, that's great. But again, definitely be aware of the industry that you're in too. So somebody applying to a job at Nationwide is going to be a lot different than somebody applying to a job within retail. Typically, retail is a little bit more expressive, to where probably a financial or insurance industry is going to be a little bit more conservative. So just be aware of your audience too. I think that's a huge thing, but definitely content first, design second.
Yep, yep, I completely agree. It's resumes are a qualifier. They're what gets you to the interview. And so in the creative world, we have resumes and portfolios, whereas other industries just have resumes. So we do not have to think of the resume as the tell-all. The resume is to just confirm that you have the experience and the bare bones pre-qualifiers to do the job. Your portfolio, on the other hand, is going to be the thing that visually shows that you can do the job. So we kind of have a twofold thing. Now, as a designer, your resume should inherently look good. It shouldn't be poorly designed. But on the other hand, it shouldn't be so designed that you can't read it at the same time. So definitely content first when it comes to your resume. Make sure that people can easily scan it very quickly, get the information they need, because at that point, most places are just checking list items. Like, do they have 4 years of college? Check. How many years of experience do they have? Check. And they're just going through that, at which point, depending on where you're looking, then they'll go, cool, they fit the bill, let's look at their portfolio. And from there, they're going to decide, do we want to bring them in for an interview or not? And I mean, I'll say the same thing with this that I say with portfolios and also with LinkedIn. And you kind of already talked about it, Tayler, but just know who you're talking to specifically. When you're talking to like a tiny, like a small design agency, like a ZoCo out there, you just want to be aware of how buttoned up does it feel, as opposed to like Nationwide. Like Nationwide's probably going to feel much more buttoned up and require it to be much more buttoned up than like ZoCo. Who's going to read it at the end of the day? So the people reading it, when you apply at a very large corporate firm, they're not going to be designers or art directors. They're probably going to be HR people who don't know as much about design, don't care as much about the expressiveness or the tone of voice. They just want to check things off. Whereas if you're applying at a really small place, they don't have HR. So you're going to have your art director looking at it. So you got to think about like the tone of voice as well, and like how much your personality and your brand shows through, and tailor make your resume for the audience that you're trying to apply for.
Yeah, I think that tailor making your resume is really, really smart. I'll just add to
Don't
that.
actually ask Tayler to make a resume. This is like tailoring it to who you're speaking to.
Yeah. So if you have like a one-size-fits-all resume, I would strongly encourage you to not use that. You should have a resume that is kind of the template for yourself, but you should customize that resume for every job that you're applying for. You should look through the job description and what they're asking, and kind of look for those keywords. Like, are they asking for somebody who's a good team player? Are they looking for somebody who's got leadership qualities? Do they want somebody who's deadline driven and who is good at multitasking? Those keywords are going to be in the position description and in the job listing. And if you can find ways to incorporate that into your resume when you're describing your skills, when you're showing the kind of the attributes that you bring to the table, when you're describing the different projects that you've worked on, or kind of just, explaining what it is that you've done in the past, find ways to work those keywords in. You're not, don't lie, because they'll find out. Like you'll be found out pretty quickly that you don't know what you're doing. But you do want to kind of help them see how your experience meets what they're looking for, and make sure that your resume is customized to do that. And then if you send a resume to another company, you do the same thing again.
So I'm gonna segue into a portfolio and then tie both resume and portfolio back together once we have a little bit further conversation. But as far as your portfolio, this is where obviously the aesthetic truly comes into play, as you know, everybody has their own character and style, and this is kind of where it more so counts. But as far as like, you know, all these companies, whether they're agencies, insurance companies, whoever, whatever they may be, because they're getting so many coming in, you know, there's always the question of, well, how many projects should I actually be showing, you know, these hiring managers or creative directors, like whoever? What is the general rule of thumb there? Or is there one?
I mean, I have my rule, but I don't know if this holds anywhere else. I like maybe 12 to 15 of your very best. Like, I'd rather see a tight, you know, 10 or 12 that are all fantastic than 20 things and you don't even like 5 of them, unless they're showing some skill that you really have to show. And that's the only reason to include something, you know, that's a little different. But I'd rather see less, but they're all amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think definitely no more than 20. You want to show enough to showcase what you bring to the table, but you don't want to show so much that somebody's going to get bored, or that somebody's going to be like, wow, this person's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, more important than how many images or how much work is in the portfolio, what's important to me is, can I tell what this person is trying to do, what their voice is? I know for myself as a photographer, I am fascinated by almost every facet of our existence. And I could photograph almost anything at any given time and come away with it thinking, well, that was pretty cool. I like that. But if I put all of that in my portfolio or on my website, somebody who would land there, they might see something that they like. But if they're asking themselves, I want to hire this guy, they have to know what they're going to get from me. And if what they think they're going to get from me is actually something very different, because on my website there's literally 7 different styles and types of work, then they're not going to be very happy. So it may feel at times a little bit counterintuitive to kind of narrow your focus, but think to yourself, who am I talking to? Who am I communicating with? Who am I presenting myself to? And then really kind of like hone in on which of your work is going to make the most sense to them. So if I was interviewing for a job at Rogue Fitness, which makes like fitness equipment, I probably wouldn't show my my food still life work. You know, I do lots of still life work with food. It wouldn't make much sense. What I might do though is show my product work, and I might show my work, my sports work, any of the work that I've done covering athletic events or that feels on brand to them. And I would show my best work within those spaces, and then I would have available the rest of my work that might complement and showcase what I could do for them. But that's not the stuff I would put front and forward. I would put the stuff front and forward that makes sense to them. And so again, as I was saying with resumes, I think even with your portfolio, you want to maybe customize that and not just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
That seems to be a kind of a theme of what you're saying, is really just kind of customize both your project work, you know, any kinds of clients that you've worked with in the past, and potentially even the verbiage to who you are trying to, you know, put this in front of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's easy enough to like literally send off like 40 resumes, but if all 40 of those resumes feel like they aren't customized and aren't at all addressing the position that the different employers are looking at, you're not going to get any response. So you're better off sending 5 tailor-made resumes to companies that seem like a really good fit than to send 100 like generic resumes to companies that you're not even a good fit for, but like they're technically hiring somebody that you have that you're qualified to do that work for.
So I'm going to sort of try to push us in a direction so that we can actually answer one of the first questions in the Q&A here. In that, you know, the question is essentially saying, I've been working in industry A, but would like to transition to industry B. And what I'm gleaning is that the prior experience doesn't entirely match up with what industry B would be looking for. So with that said, whether or not it's a significant life choice to segue into another area or zone, how would you go about tailoring your resume and portfolio to cater to that next step, assuming that it's a potentially very different step?
Yeah. I think when I was in school, we had Aaron Draplin come and talk to us. And he said something that I think just makes so much sense. If you want to work in this place and your portfolio now doesn't show it, just make work that fits that. Even if it's not real client work, like no one really cares if it's actually client work or not. It's when it comes to like your portfolio, for example, because your portfolio is there to prove that you can technically do the work and that you understand the core concepts of the type of stuff that you're trying to do. So if you don't have like the history behind you and the backing of working at previous places and actually having client work or real projects and doing these specific things, and you're really passionate about getting into this other industry, just start making work. I have a friend from college who is just bound and determined, and he's not on the list. He's bound and determined to work at SpaceX. He just wants to be a designer there so badly. And he's never worked in that kind of industry before. But he just makes stuff all the time that's just kind of down that path, and just posts it all the time. He talks to people that works there all the time. He asks them their opinions about the technical skills behind it and what it took to make it. And no one really seems to care that he doesn't have that historical backing behind him and in his resume, because at the end of the day, like, if you haven't worked somewhere, it's really hard to write on your resume that you've worked somewhere if you haven't done it. So I think a lot of it just kind of comes behind just like networking with people, talking with people who are in that industry, and just showing that you're passionate about it by just making work, regardless of if it's actually real or not. It'd be nice if it was real, but if it's not, then do the next best thing.
And speaking of real, Tayler, go for it if you had
You're good.
What about your sort of educational background? Does that need to align with the different potential future path that you're choosing for yourself?
No. It depends. Like, obviously, there are certain things you need to be certified or whatever. I can't go be a physician without training. But like within our industry, I think a lot of people switch and move and shift, from what they started out doing. You just keep gaining all these experiences. So it's not, you may have gone to design school, but then you ended up like being really good at writing and you end up being more of a copywriter or something. Like, if you have the experience and can show you can do the work, nobody's going to say like, oh, you can't be a writer because you weren't an English major. It's, if you can show you have the work, you have the work, unless it requires some special, training.
Mm-hmm.
I know lots of people in our industry who didn't go to any kind of creative major or whatever. They just ended up in it somehow, or they were just naturally good at it and they just kind of started doing it. It's not so important what your major was or, what even your first couple jobs were.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that that nothing you do is wasted, and a lot of times you can bring a different perspective and more value to a role having done other things previously. So, I mean, as a photographer, my job could be simply defined as pressing a button on a little, machine. But, when clients hire me, some of those clients hire me because I also have a strong understanding of journalism and of social media and of the business community. And there's an expectation that I'm going to have to be communicating with those clients and about things more than just like pressing a button on a camera. And so I think a lot of times it's going to the question that the person had in the Q&A. I think a lot of times it's helping people understand how your experience adds value to your previous experience, adds value to the role, and just kind of showcasing what that brings to the table, what that will allow you to do, so that they can understand, oh, okay, I see, like, you actually have all this experience over here, and there's a lot more overlap maybe than people would initially assume.
Awesome.
Like those transferable skills, a certain amount of your experience will transfer. And although I'm not always a huge fan of having like personal interests and hobbies on resumes, sometimes those can help you. Like we had somebody who wrote a fashion blog and she really wanted to write for fashion industry, but she was doing something else. We actually were able to get her the job by showing the work on her personal blog. Now, normally, you wouldn't necessarily show your personal social media to get a job, but in that case, she was just passionate about it, so it's what she did in her spare time. Sometimes that kind of, like you were saying, your friend, sometimes that just personal work you're doing on your own, if it's something you really care about, it can help be like that extra catalyst that shows you can do the work and you have the passion and, for that industry or whatever that company is.
So I'm going to sort of tie back the resume and portfolio together here for, oftentimes in like the, your graduating sense, the two are sort of one in a way. For me, I'm going to speak directly to my personal experience here in that, like, being a business owner, there's no real need for me to have a resume these days. I haven't updated mine in years now. My portfolio is it's the client work that we put out there. It's the way that we communicate with our clients, our friends, the way that people know us. So that is hugely important. But, am I making a good decision by not having a consistently up-to-date resume? I don't know. So, that's the question. Is one more important than the other? It's a changing day and age. And so which one has more precedence, or does that seem to be the case?
It probably depends on
I
what
can
you're
jump
looking
in
to
on.
do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Taylor.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, I guess it depends on where you're at in your career. If you're actively looking for a job, it's probably best to have everything up to date. But if you're currently working, there's not any hesitations to where you are working or any concerns. I think making sure that you keep your portfolio updated or having your work in a specific file that you can easily go to in order to update that. Making a resume, it could take 1 to 2 days if you really needed to make it last minute. It's just being aware of like the work that you have done. And I think especially if your portfolio is up to date, it's a lot easier to go and look at your portfolio and build a resume from that versus try to build a resume and then go to update your portfolio. So I guess it just depends on where you're at in your career, but I would recommend, if you were to pick one over the other, keeping your portfolio up to date would probably be a little bit more important than the resume, because you can make a resume in 1 to 2 days.
Ditto.
You can't make a full portfolio in 1 to 2 days?
Unless you're Superman.
It's up very quickly.
You can make a portfolio in 1 to 2 days.
Good work takes
Not the one you
time.
want to show, but
Yeah, I would just to kind of add to what Taylor said, I think it depends on what you're looking to do. If your goal is to get hired at a company that has a position available for the role that you fit, you need to have both. You really do. But if your goal is just to freelance, like just to put together jobs as they come, to that a portfolio, and more specifically a website, is going to be a better use of your time. As a freelancer myself, I'll say there's not a single time that any publication, any client has ever asked me for a resume. But they all look at my Instagram, they all look at my website, and that's the way that they determine whether I'm a good fit for them. But if I was applying for a job at some company here in town, I would make sure I have a resume. So just ask yourself, like, where you are, like Tayler said, where you are in your career, but also what kind of work are you looking for? Are you looking for full-time work, or are you looking for freelance assignments and opportunities here and there?
So taking it to a virtual note, sort of, LinkedIn is an awesome platform for, virtual resumes. You can post your work there. But outside of that, what are some of the best, digital platforms that you've seen portfolios?
Instagram. I mean, as a photographer, I can say without a doubt that 90% of the work that I've gotten in the last 5+ years has come first and foremost through Instagram. And I can't really think of a reason not to be on Instagram as a photographer. And I would say that for illustrators, graphic designers, that's again the same. It's where people are, and it's a place where you can kind of showcase your work, and I actually think in a better way than LinkedIn does. LinkedIn has its strengths, but like I said, 90% of the work I've gotten in the last few years has come from Instagram.
I agree. I think it's a great place to get found, or for people to be exposed to your work. If you're applying for a position, applying for a job or whatever, like we get a variety of things. I'm always fine with a website. Well, I should say it depends on what you do. Mm-hmm. So if you're a graphic designer, photographer, someone like that, like a nice little Squarespace website, looks beautiful, easy. Even I can build one, like very simple. That's awesome. That's a great way to show your work, or even just a nice PDF of your work. So like on our end, we need something we can send our clients, right? So I need a website link, or a PDF or something. And there's other kind of platforms you can use. So you can build your own site, or you can use some of the portfolio platforms, or you can do a PDF. But you need something you can send to people. But then like the bar is different if you're an interactive designer or something like that. Obviously you should be showing your work on the website you built for yourself. It's a little bit different if you're in that sector. But if you're not in that sector, I think kind of a simple platform that we're all familiar with is great. You can easily showcase your work that way.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on what you are. If you're like a photographer or graphic designer, if you do cinema, it just really depends on what you do, and how it's going to dictate how you show it. Even down to if we're just going to take graphic design. So that's the world I live in. There are different types of graphic designers out there. You could really specialize in brand. You could specialize in print. You could specialize in web. If you specialize in web, I think there's kind of a more inherent expectation that you can show that you understand web. So I think websites are a little bit more important when it comes to that. But I think at the end of the day, simple Squarespace sites are just the way to go. They're really quick. They're not terribly expensive. You can do them in much, much less time than coding your own website. I think there's a misconception, and I think especially when you're coming straight out of school, there's a misconception that in order to show that you know what you're doing, you need to code your own website, or you need to, and I think in reality, it doesn't really matter. I think people would rather see a nice presentation of your work than be impressed by you saying, oh, I coded my own website. If your own coded website, even though it's coded yourself, it doesn't visually represent your work very well, it's going to fail as a website, and people probably aren't going to seek you out quite as much.
Yeah.
But,
Your opener shouldn't be you should see the back end. It looks real good.
Unless that's the work you do, and then it should be gorgeous, and you're showcasing your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're really anal about it, like I am, like make your own website. There's plenty of tools out there to do like completely custom themes on top of WordPress, or like I know Wix gives you a little bit more control over stuff like that. But don't think that the only way to be successful when showing your work online is to do something custom. Like just getting a Squarespace template and just showing good work on it will get you just as far.
Awesome. I'm going to push us in because this is still a topic that I want to get to before we call it an evening. Virtual interviews, now especially through the COVID. I'm sure that's been a trending theme for just about the entire world. When an interview is flowing, and sometimes there are hiccups, your Wi-Fi may crap out, audio may stop or something like that. Like we're sort of at the mercy of technology. So if something actually like that happens, how do you pick up and go from there? And, Kristen, you may be able to speak to this, Tayler too. Yeah.
Oh, it's so painful, right? Like nobody wants that to happen. I'm trying to think. I don't even think we've had that experience, fortunately, yet. But I mean, you might start just like the beginning of the interview, like exchange mobile numbers in case, like, hey, if we drop, here's my mobile number. You can just call me. You can at least continue the conversation. So it's not just like, oh my gosh, where'd they go? Now I can't connect at all. But I guess my biggest thing is to just try to test everything you can before the meeting. So it's just like, for an in-person interview, this sounds nerdy, but I tell people, like, get in your car and drive there and figure out how long it'll take you and where you're going to park, because you think you know where you're going to park, and then you get there and that garage is closed or there's road construction or whatever. To me, it's the same thing. So if you can go in and test the tool, like if you know what tool they're using, especially if it's one you haven't used before, make sure some of them require you to download a widget or whatever, like try to test it before with a friend, or even just a lot of times you can just like try to dial into the link early, and you can't necessarily get in the meeting room, but you can see if it'll work. Like as much as you can do all of that before, maybe you can just eliminate a lot of those problems. And then the other thing is, like you said, bandwidth. And frankly, like if there's anyone else in your house, just make them all get off the internet for an hour. Like that will make a huge difference if your kids aren't also streaming a game and your spouse is trying to work or whatever. Just like everybody, I have an interview, like just get off the internet and go do something else. It can make a huge difference.
If you got a dongle.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can finish.
I was gonna say, if you have a dongle for your computer, Ethernet, just plug straight into your router. It will solve so many problems.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add in on that, the good thing about a lot of the platforms that are being utilized, there's a chat function. So if the voice goes out, or if the video goes out, or if it's a little blurry or lagging, at least you can type in a little chat. But like Kristen said, I definitely think it's a good idea to exchange contact information before the interview, just in case something does happen. I know a lot of times on like our end, just depending on what the client is using, so whether it's like WebEx or Zoom, I'll typically like download whatever platform if I don't have it, to test it with whoever is interviewing, just to go through like a little mock interview, to where we can make sure the sound is good, the video looks good. If they are asked to share their screen, which sometimes you are, because you can have your portfolio on your screen and walk through it together. Knowing how to do that, I think, is a really good idea. But yeah, typically we'll just do like a test or a mock interview. We'll go through questions too, because sometimes it can be a little awkward when you're answering questions to a video or a computer and not to an actual person. And I mean, you're hearing it right now. People are kind of cutting in and out and chiming in wherever. So it can get a little bit awkward, but I definitely think practicing and going through that is definitely a good idea.
So we're bumping up on our mark. I still have one last question that I want to ask as it pertains to the virtual interviews, and then we'll get into the Q&A section unless any of our panelists have anything else to say. But say the interview goes well, there's no tech mishaps or anything like that. For myself, I have most definitely said the wrong thing at the worst possible time. And so what happens, what happens if you say something that you just didn't intend, or like your nerves kind of sparked up and something happens? How do you recover from that?
I would say,
during the interview?
I'm sorry?
Are you saying during the interview or?
During, yes. And then I guess one follow-up question as to how to properly follow up.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I would say, I mean, what we typically do, we'll follow up with whoever's interviewing to see how it went. Oh, shoot, I maybe said something I shouldn't have, or I didn't get my point across as best as I could have. So typically what I'll have them do is type up exactly like the point that you were trying to get across. And I've had people get the job based on their thank you note, explaining like, hey, I didn't get my point across, or I know I said this, but I kind of meant to go into this direction. And they ended up getting the job because of the clarification and the thank you note. So I stand by that.
Say, I might have messed up, but here's what I meant.
Yeah. And I know the managers appreciate that too. I mean, nobody's perfect, especially now with video interviews. And if you have to record an answer too, those are really awkward. So I think we're all humans, as long as you're genuine in your response and you actually care about, the work that you want to be doing. I think a thank you note, just thanking them for their time and kind of getting your point across is a good idea. Or if they asked you a question and you didn't have the work prepared at that moment, following up with that work sample of like, hey, I know we talked about style guides and I didn't really have any examples, but I did want to follow up because I have done that and here's where I've done it at and here's my example. That goes a long way too.
Yeah. And all the things you just said, I mean, it applies to an in-person interview too. I mean, people get nervous whether it's in person or video, and sometimes, you forget your name or whatever, like they ask you a question, then later you're thinking like, I didn't thoroughly answer that at all. I mean, that can happen in person as well. So, something offensive.
Like you sounded like an idiot or something like that. Like,
oh, I really totally forgot, to share this piece that was related to what you were asking me. Like you said, that can happen in person or on a video, and that additional follow-up is, I think, appreciated. It means you went home and were thinking about the interview and were excited and interested enough to still be thinking about it and to think about what else you might want to share. Like, to me, that shows a lot of interest, rather than like you walked out the door and I never heard from you again until I called you back. You know what I mean? Like, it's a positive to me that you want to follow up.
Yeah, and I think
you're into the job.
Yeah, I think so much of what an interview is ultimately is it's kind of a personality. It's a little bit of a personality test where you're kind of seeing, hey, do we like connect here? Would you be somebody that I would enjoy working with? Are you going to be a good fit here? And I mean, I can say for myself personally, I would rather work with somebody who makes mistakes and then acknowledges that they made a mistake and says, hey, here's the mistake I made, but here's how I think I'm going to fix it, or here's my potential solution. I'd rather work with that person than someone who just doesn't acknowledge that they make mistakes. Like, I have no interest in working with those people. So, and I think that's the case for most. So just remember that, there are the professional kind of qualifications. There's a resume. There's all the kind of like, technical side of like, is this person qualified to do this job? But at the end of the day, even if you are, if you don't seem enjoyable, if you don't seem like you would be a good fit for the team, you probably aren't going to get the job. So just keep that part in mind, that so much of it is about just finding that finding out if you're a good personality fit.
And once the interview has, finished up, and on the note of, all right, do I send a follow-up, thank you note, email, Alexis just dropped in the Q&A a leave behind. Like, what is a rule of thumb as far as just following up? Like, how long do you wait to hear a response? At what point do you say, like, I haven't heard anything back, I might as well just send a simple message? And, how long do you wait for that kind of thing?
I think a follow-up is, sorry. I think follow-ups day of, I think, are totally fine. Like, it's not like what you see on TV when like people go on dates, like on sitcoms, and it's like, oh, you gotta wait 24 hours before you text them. Like, no, it's just email them back like the day of. Usually what I would do is ask them in the interview, like, when should I expect to hear back from you? Like, to have that conversation during the interview. That way you don't have any unknowns. And if they tell you, like, hey, expect to hear back within a week, cool. Send them a follow-up, thank you, like just thanking them for the time and how much you enjoyed it that afternoon, and then give them a week. And then, if like a week and a couple days, week and a half go by, then yeah, maybe follow up and just kind of say like, hey, just checking in, seeing where we're at, really excited, that kind of stuff.
100%. And I mean, I love a handwritten thank you note. I enjoy getting them, at my office. It's lovely. But I would also say right now, I don't know where people are if they're getting mail, like that's the reality. I get mail very, infrequently right now. So just for the delay of it, I'd probably send an email now. I think it's okay to do both. You could do a quick, like, an hour later, hey, thank you so much for your time, email. And then you could also do a handwritten note later if you want, but you don't want too much of a lag, I guess is what I'm saying. You don't want them to get that thank you note, 3 weeks from now when they go back to their office. So as much as it's lovely, the practicality right now is probably email, and also people are moving quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, just to kind of tag off of that, I will say that my fiance, I think at least, maybe I'm lying, pretty sure, one of her previous jobs, I think one of the reasons she got the job was because she sent them a handwritten, like, thank you to each person individually who interviewed her. And that really, really impressed them. So that's a very, very good call out.
It goes really far with me. Oh, the other thing you had said about leave behinds, a few years ago I would have said, yes, but I don't, like, we wouldn't keep them. I don't know what we would do with them. We don't have files about people, it's all in the computer. So I probably wouldn't keep a leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
But, you guys, you might feel differently in a design firm, but would you, like Josh or Brian, would you keep leave behinds?
Well, I don't have, no, actually I do. Yeah. So I have a promo, which is, for those who don't know, it's like basically a promotional marketing material that showcases my work. It's not exactly a portfolio. It's a little bit smaller, but this is something that I mail in advance of meeting with people, to photo editors, creative directors. I mail it all across the country. I have a list that I've put together, and so sometimes if I don't, if I haven't already sent one to someone, or if I have a new piece, then yeah, I might bring that to somebody for a client meeting. I go to New York and LA at least once or twice a year and do meetings with folks in those cities, because unfortunately that's just where all the hiring happens for my industry. And a lot of times I will do essentially like a cold email to people that I think would be interested in hiring me, but that have not done so yet and who I don't have a relationship with. And I'll just say, hey, I'm going to be in town for a couple days. Do you have time for a meeting? I'd love to sit down and show my portfolio to you. And in those instances, I might bring a portfolio or a promo piece. But I don't know that it really does much. It just kind of, to me, it's really just kind of a signifier to them that, like, oh, this guy's legit. He has his own promo piece. He's not just some Instagram guy who thinks he can be a real photographer. So much of the industry is like that kind of a positioning, but yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I do.
And mind you, when we mention leave behinds, it's something more than really just a business card. It can sort of act in that vein. But
Like a small promo piece or whatever.
yeah. And I think business cards sort of have an underlying, like people don't really use them anymore. I've had mine literally handed back to me the second I gave it to somebody else. I was like, I have plenty. I don't need it back. Thank you. Just for me. Toss it the second you don't see me, whatever.
Yeah, the last few business cards I had ordered a round of like 100 of them, and basically all the shoots that I do, I'm like out and about in the world, maybe at like a restaurant or like out somewhere, and people would come up and be like, "Oh, are you a photographer?" And I'd be like, "What gave it away?" Like the production crew and the guy holding the camera and like
What are the odds? Yeah.
whatever. And then they would be like, "Oh, I'm a photographer too. Do you have a business card?" And I would be like, "Why? Like, why am I going to give you my business card?" So anyways, that's my own little like horror story. Like, that's why I don't have business cards anymore. Because ultimately the only people that ever asked for one were people that I had no interest in giving it to. And I've found that more important than having a business card is having an actual conversation. So if I meet somebody that I think is going to be like important for my career moving forward, or that could be a good contact, I'm going to try in that moment to engage in a conversation with them, something memorable. I'm going to ask them questions, and I'm going to ask them if they would mind if I would reach out to them in the future, or ask if I can connect with them on LinkedIn or on Instagram. That to me is a much more tangible and much more productive like engagement than just to say, "Oh, you work in photography? Here's my card. Call me sometime." Like that to me just doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
I saved them long enough to go back and connect with them on LinkedIn, and then it's like, so I don't forget their name. I can look them up. That's,
Yeah. Relationships, just largest rule of thumb ever. Relationships and networking, like just person to person conversation, contact, talking with people and having those relationships is just so unbelievably more impactful than any leave behind, any business card, anything like that will ever be. I like the best thing you could possibly do for yourself when you're trying to get a job is just to network with people, ask people, well, not right now, but ask people out for coffee, pick people's brains, talk to them. Like I know there's somebody in here that mentioned one of the questions was like asking for advice instead of a job. Like that's what that kind of is don't, people treat jobs like it's a transactional experience. And like, I have a skill set, you need a person to fill it. Let's, here's my resume. It's more about people talking to people and having relationships that actually mean something. That's going to go so much further. And that's how people are going to remember you. That I think that can't be understated. That's definitely the most important part.
Yep. And I think to go off of that too, especially right now when everybody is going to be working remote for maybe their whole time at the company or for some type of duration. And this isn't to scare anybody, but I read like an article that said, we're all working remote and it's a lot easier to fire or let go somebody when you only know them on like a remote level. So I think it's really important right now to build those relationships and to reach out and like ask for virtual happy hours or virtual lunches, or hey, instead of a phone call, let's do a video so we can actually talk face to face, and reaching out for help and still making your name known on that team or at that company. I think that's going to be really, really important moving forward.
Yeah. Even if you've networked with someone who isn't looking right now for a job, they might have friends or colleagues that is looking for somebody, and a recommendation from somebody goes so much further than just like picking a resume out of a pile and going, this person looks good.
I agree with all that, and we are unfortunately a bit over time here, not to cut us off here, but I think that's a good note to at least end our conversation on. We can still leave a few minutes for the Q&A that we haven't really gotten to yet. From the list of questions that have been both popped up in the chat box and the Q&A section, I'll just kind of open this up for you panelists. If there are any questions that you feel like you can speak to, then please by all means do so.
There were a couple questions about like trying to build your experience with freelance work, or trying to, you know, how do I how do I not get put in a no pile if I'm you know, if I don't have the 1 to 3 years of experience, a recent graduate. So I mean, experience is experience. So if you're building it up with freelance, you're building it up with an internship, like whatever that is, you have to get your experience somewhere. And so that, you know, maybe you don't have that 1 to 3 years of experience, but if you did 2 really solid internships and you've been freelancing, you probably have about a year of experience. You know, 1 to 3, that's entry level, right? So school, I wouldn't count school as experience, but I would count any of those work experiences that you had in your field, you know, not necessarily just your college job, because we all have those, but in your field, I would count all of that. And I mean, it sounds tough, but like you just have to get it somewhere, you know, just do whatever work for whoever makes sense to build it up, because you just have to build that up so you have something to show, kind of all the stuff we're talking about. You need pieces for your portfolio and so on. And I think, you know, freelance work is definitely considered valid work experience, whether you're applying for a corporation or wherever. You know, it's kind of like Kyle and Josh were both saying, like you have your resume to say, here's where I've worked, and then your portfolio to say, and here's what I can do. If you can show that you can do it and you have at least a reasonable minimum of experience that they're looking for, you know, you're about a viable candidate, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to tailor off of that, like the years of experience thing, I think they matter more when you don't know the person that is hiring. They matter less when you do know the person that's hiring. And I think that all goes back to that networking thing. Like, just reach out, talk to people. Like if it's, and obviously it depends on the different type of place. Like if you're going through like an HR person because you were trying to work at like Nationwide Insurance or Abercrombie and Fitch, a little bit different. They might really take seriously that 1 to 3 years of experience. If you're trying to do something like work at a place where you're going to more than likely be able to reach out and email and start a conversation with the person that's hiring, take them out to coffee, email them, video chat with them, you know, pick their brain, ask for advice. If they are a active participant in like CSCA or AAF or something like that, join those, network with people, get to know them. The more you know people, the less and less those like little qualifiers matter, because as long as they know that you can do the job, then they might be more willing to look past the 1 to 3 years, or, you know, let's say it's like 3 to 5 years and you're not quite there yet. Like they might be more willing to look past it if they just know you already and they know that you can do the job.
Yeah,
I would say,
go ahead, Taylor.
sorry, really quick. I would say references are definitely great when you don't really have the years of experience, or like recommendations on LinkedIn. I think when people can brag about you, and I mean, if it's a manager or professor, or somebody from your internship, speak on your behalf. I mean, some people catch on quicker than others, and somebody with 1 year of experience might be a better designer, honestly, than somebody with 3 years of experience. So if you have people in your corner talking about you and you're able to share those to the people that you're applying for jobs for, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, this is like, I just think related to the question, but not exactly the question. For somebody or for a position that's 1 to 3 years of experience, I think this doesn't really fit quite as much. But I know I'm guilty of, like, I used to come across positions that were looking for somebody with like 5 years more experience. And I'd look through, this was, you know, before I had the experience that I have now. And I would look through and I would think, I think I would be a good fit for this, but like based on this description, like, I don't know that, you know, that they would even give me a chance. Or I would say, this is the job that I want. How do I get that job, right? And I think one of the things that for recent grads that is going to be kind of a little bit of an awakening, or a little bit of a kind of shell shock, is that that first job, that first 2 jobs, maybe the first 3 jobs even, are probably not quite going to be exactly what you wanted and exactly what you went to school for. And that's okay. Like, I think that I used to have friends who they would get their first job out of college and then they would complain, like, I'm working all these hours, they have me doing crap work, I'm not happy about it, like my boss sucks and I'm not making enough money. And I'm like, what did you expect? Like, we aren't going to like go to college and then get out of school and then immediately get handed $100,000 job where we have total autonomy and no one looking over the top of us and no one second guessing us. Like, it just doesn't work like that. I kind of wish that it did. It'd be kind of fun. As somebody who, like, I've found that I work best as a freelancer, partly because I like to have the level of autonomy that I have. And that's something that you just are going to have to figure out over time. But just remember that you may not get the position that you immediately wanted right away. And that's okay. Find ways to make it work for you and use it as an opportunity, as a ladder to kind of get where you want to go.
There was one fairly specific question about ATS software for major corporate recruiting. I don't actually know what that means, but do any of you know?
I'm sure Tayler and I probably jump on that one. I mean, the reality is this person is right. If you don't get past it's applicant tracking software. It's like just what everybody's resume gets scanned into, basically. If you don't get past the software, they won't see your resume. So it goes back to what we were saying in the very beginning with your resume. Like, you have to use all the right keywords and the right, software. If I need a designer who knows InDesign and, like, let's say this client is Ancient and they also need somebody who knows Quark Express, I have to be able to just search for Quark Express and have it show up on your resume. And if you know it, but it's not on your resume, I can't find you. So just think about, like, your resume has to be searchable by all the important keywords, and that's how the ATS works. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Tayler.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I know, like, just from research that we gather, for like one opening, there's 70 resumes. So right now it's probably times that by like 3 or 4. So if you don't have those keywords on your resume or the top skills that they're looking for, I mean, the chances of you getting, again, put to that no pile is probably a lot higher. So I think it's definitely super important to make sure that your resume is just straightforward, you're getting your point across. But I do also think it's a good idea to, again, reach out to maybe the hiring manager or somebody that you're trying to get in front of, or talk with your network to see who they know, to see who you can get introduced to, is definitely a great way to go. I know with our recruiting efforts, we typically work on like a referral basis. So, I mean, we utilize LinkedIn, but when we are trying to network and just see who's out there that's looking for jobs or would potentially be looking for jobs, a lot of it's like, hey, like my friend Josh Smith, he's looking, he has XYZ, he's great, reliable. He's probably going to get the job over somebody that is randomly off the street. And that's just, to be honest, and that's straightforward. So I think it's super important to network, because at the end of the day, it is about who you know. But I would definitely say make sure your resume is straightforward and you have everything that they're looking for.
With a lot of companies, you probably have to apply through their job board or to their posting, but I mean, your chances are much lower of being seen there. So all the stuff Taylor's talking about, where you actually become a person and not just another record in their database, so important.
If I will say I've never been in the position where I had my resume go through one of those. But if it's anything like any other screen reader type of thing, if you're kind of more paranoid that you're not, whatever you're making isn't going to be seen, make sure that your text is like actually able to be read. So like open it up in Acrobat or something and make sure you can actually highlight the text so that a computer can read it. If it's just flattened into like an image, like a JPEG, then it's probably not going to be able to read it. So just making sure like small things like that as well are probably going to go pretty far if you're a little worried about it.
Yeah, no funky fonts or anything like that. Times New Roman, all that basic fun stuff.
There was a question about doing a student project with a major brand and then tagging them.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that too.
Everybody may have your own opinion about this, but I will say back when I worked at limited brands, I always thought this was kind of a funny fine line because people would come in and show us like spec projects for, I made something for Victoria's Secret. And well, that's kind of cool because they're showing interest and it's, your brand, but people on the inside always know way more about that brand than you ever can on the outside. So it's always tough because it's always a little off. And it's sort of like, I appreciate your effort, but I kind of wish they would do a project for like a competitor, do it for some other lingerie brand to kind of show you get the industry, but don't try to replicate what we're doing. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, it's too hard to know all the details of a brand when you don't work there.
Yeah. Personal story. I actually did a watch catalog in college. And I went to like a portfolio night type of thing where like professionals were there to review portfolios. It was on a New York City trip that I went to. And I just coincidentally sat down with somebody who worked at an ad agency, a pretty big ad agency, showing them all this work. And he let me go through the whole project for this watch catalog. And at the very end, he told me that their agency worked for that watch brand and how he knew that everything that just came out of my mouth was wrong. And it just like took this project that felt really good to me and just like flushed it down the toilet immediately. So
I'll just
like related, but not exact, right? Like if it's in a different watch brand, he might have kind of been excited about it.
Yeah.
I'll add a slightly different perspective. I mean, as a photographer, I will say that I've definitely in the past shot projects where, test projects where I might like test with, hair and makeup artists or with models or just to kind of see if we're all a good fit. And in doing that, I might use a product or a brand just to kind of like showcase what we're trying to do. And sometimes in those instances, I have tagged the brands or mentioned that that the model might be wearing a certain brand. And a lot of times the brands have reached out and like they've really liked the work, and I've actually gotten work through that. So I think it kind of depends. The thing that's really important is that you don't present yourself as having worked for a brand when you haven't. Don't make it confusing, like that you like if you go get some Nike shoes and then you do like a product shot of Nike shoes in your studio and then you put it up and like new work for Nike, like that's not good. Don't do that. But if you put something up and you say like, just got these new shoes and I just had to have some fun in the studio, hey Nike, if you're looking for someone, hit me up. Like that, I think is totally fine. And I think a lot of times, especially if you're trying something interesting or if you're doing something that is visually just like really kind of cool, I think it's a good way to kind of get on somebody's radar. But just be careful about it, how you do it.
Yeah, like it's more about flattery than like you're really passionate about their brand. But if you go a little too far and try and come across as I'm the expert in your brand or I know exactly what the strategy behind what you're doing is and all that, and you don't, then you just have to be ready for them to tell you you're wrong on it.
Yeah, also if you're really good, be ready for them to follow up with you and say, hey, we love this, can we share it on our Instagram page? And like be ready for them to do that. And for myself, I always have to remind myself that like these are brands with like literally multi-million-dollar marketing budgets, and before I give my work away to them for free, like it's for me, it's
That's
much better.
Different conversation.
Yeah, totally, but it's much better to have a conversation or to be on somebody's radar and to have it serve as kind of like an introduction to them as like, hey, maybe this is somebody that we could work with in the future, way better than getting a share or getting like a regram on Instagram. Like,
Yeah.
That's
Repost you and we'll tag you.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's exposure, man.
Yeah. There's a time and a place for some of that, but just, be wary of those when they come along.
So maintain your artistic integrity. Don't sell yourself short. And please tailor your resume, your portfolio to everybody that you are speaking to. On that note, it is 8:01. I believe we're a bit over our initial timing, but unless anybody has any last words, I'm thinking this is probably a good time to close it out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if we didn't answer questions or whatever, just to email me. I don't know if you're sharing our information or whatever, but you can find me on our website. I'm very easy to track down.
Great. I know that we'll be sending out the recording of this. My guess is within the next week or two. And so if anybody is open to it, we can dab down your contact information as a resource moving forward for anybody that's interested too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Sounds good.
Great. Well, thanks again for all the panelists, A and Susie, just helping to make it happen, and everybody that's still here with us and everybody that was. Appreciate you being here, and have a great rest of the night.
Thank you.
Oh, we got one new message.
Bye.
Oh,
Thanks, Bruce.
You're most welcome. All right. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.